Božena Čiurlionienė, please take the floor. Prohibition versus Apotheosis over time, acoustic aspects.
So good morning, everybody. We talked already about the perfect consonants, and now let's talk about perfect dissonance. And my theme is Prohibition versus Apotheosis of a Tritone. And the object of the research is Tritone. It has a very wide and peculiar history of its treatment. Therefore, the spectrum of its analysis is also wide. Despite the size of the object, Tritone characteristics reveal special tension in its sounding and problematics. Its functionality and significance is supported by the changing concept throughout the history, as well as the canonical use in different composing techniques and harmonical systems. The uniqueness of a tritone, according to both theoretical and practical composing approach, can be explained by its physical acoustic peculiarities. Such description as harsh, rough, can be easily explained also by the 20th century cognitive music psychology research results. According to psychologist Diana Deutsch research results, the perception of a tritone can vary. One listener will understand sound sequence C F sharp as ascending interval, and accordingly G C sharp as descending, while another listener at the same time sound sequence will treat as descending and as ascending intonation. David Butler assumes that the tritone is a necessary component for the identification of a tonal center. His research revealed that listeners who heard the tritone and the tonic could much easier identify the tonality of a music piece, and those who heard the sequence of than those who heard only sequence of triad chords. This allows us to conclude that tritone, due to its acoustic specifics such as irregularity, sharpness, unpredictability, has traction towards constant intervals, and this lets us to identify a tonal center. This also can be formulated as a law from chaos to order. It's possible to say. In medieval treatises on music, tritone most often described as problematic interval. In organized sound systems, it was called as confusion, or not multum in uso, use only in small amounts in compositional practice. Also, rough or harsh. Tritone as a false fifth usage in church music was strictly forbidden. In Middle Ages, as well as the Renaissance, tritone as diabolus in musica, devil in music, was treated as undesirable interval both in vertical and horizontal structures. The rule mi contra fa in medieval hexachord theory was major warning against possibility dangerous interval sequences. Yeah, that's about the tritone, and in my article I will try explain, because it's a lot and a lot of position. One say it's consonance, another it's dissonance, quarta falsa, easy to sing, hard to sing, so we'll try to understand, yeah. And the rule, mi contra fa, prohibited the usage of a major second between third and fourth hexachord degree in sound organization systems. Guido Aretinus, in order to avoid the conclusion, suggests this system of B quadratum and B rotundum usage in vertical and horizontal structures. Double C in hexachord system appears after the annihilation of tritone. In order to avoid medieval theorists in order to avoid tritone in medieval music, theorists created set various rules that composers needed to apply. That rules I will read, it was in Latin, so it was like some labyrinth for me when I read the first. So the rule sounds like above the first, D, fourth G, and 7C, in the tone line, it had to be a major second. The second E and the fifth tones had to be surrounded by major second from below and minor second from above. The third F and the sixth B had to be surrounded by half tone from below and tone from above. The exact rule eliminated any possibility of a tritone formation in music, and at the same time allowed to avoid harsh soundings. In the 14th century, treatment of the concept of the tritone started to change. Tritone started to appear in the weak parts of a bar or cadences. On other side, Johannes Tinctoris regarded tritone as an enemy of nature. It is only unpleasant to human air, but is also impossible to sing, neither up or down. Dissonance in tritone is hostile to nature itself. It irritates and annoys human hearing. 16th century music theorist Giuseppe Zarlino states that the sequence of the two major triads, right there, not allowed, due to the fact that these intervals are not harmonically connected, and their sequences form tritone. The 16th century brings a turning point in understanding tritone. Changes are clear in the vertical and the horizontal composition. Nicola Vincentino, in his work, suggested the use of a tritone not only when it accidentally appears in the interconnection of hexachords in diagonal, but also to use the interval in compositional horizontal melody line. He strictly rejected all doubts regarding tritone's intonation in vocal practices, claiming that if one can sing the sound sequence F, G, A, B, then one can sing the tritone too. It all depends on practice, according to Vicentino. And he said, multiply repetition of the same, be it the hardest task, makes it easy in any profession. Nicola Vicentino calls the tritone most underrated interval in compositional practice, while the effect it produces as wonderful and heavenly. Now we have an example of the Mersenne, and he emphasized the necessity of a dissonance, including the tritone itself. His treatise, Harmonie Universelle, argues that tritones need to be avoided. Quite contrary, the interval should be used in the music with its adequate resolution. We claim that the need for the resolution might also explain its harshness to human ear as well as its irregularity. Composers who started to use this interval always tried to resolve it as soon as possible, or other words, to stabilize it. Mersenne, discussing tritone unusual soundings, notices that great composers might not be fond of the interval, but it is not that important to follow their lead. And the earlier mentioned examples reveal us the clear shift in the use and functionality of a tritone in compositional systems. One can see that starting with its prohibition, tritone slowly reappears in compositional horizontal line, where it is filled with transitional tones. As most of compositional practice were based on the vocal music, tritone has always been hard to intonate interval. This might be also a cause of its rejection. It is easy to check with a computer that even singers who are well in tune with other intervals have difficulties with a tritone. They either raise or lower tritone. Human hearing tends towards constant intervals. Step by step, tritone starts being used in the compositional practice. And now, very short, I have an example of tritone functionality in a piece of Johann Sebastian Bach, where the tritone used together with mentioning lies, falseness, death, and murder in order to emphasize the tragedy of the situation. Yeah, if you see right here, there are two words where he used the tritones, and as we can say, three tritones we see are associated with the word snake in the vertical line, in the horizontal line, and in diagonal line. So yeah, this had to do with Triton acoustic features, thus raising tension and fortifying the meaning of a text. Until the 18th century, still Triton was regarded as unnecessary imperfect. It was widely discussed within the compositional practices. For example, Giovanni Maria Artusi became harsh critic of the Monteverdi due to use a triton in his music. According to him, after the performance, singer is not completely sure whether his performance was right. We can find examples in Monteverdi music when he used the tritons without any rules, like 2 tritons or 3 tritons in a row. Theorist Joseph Fati emphasized the importance not only of chords but also of intervals. According to him, the character and attraction of intervals determines chords and harmony organization principles in the functional system. Fati theory dictates the specific rules of the function system. One of them reveals the importance of a triton and 7 chords, as well as they influence to the unity of tonical system, sorry. And one short example of Beethoven, where in that piece, Fidelio reveals the synthesis of tritonic functional principles. The interval used as in vertical and horizontal lines, as well as functional sequences and general tonal plan in the piece. It is also used in tonalities of the characters. Tonalities of the first act parts are organized in the tritonic intervals. One can notice very different possibilities of the triton usage in this piece of Beethoven when compared to the works of the previous century's composer. Here triton functions in all layers of the compositional structure as the organizing principle. If we arrange the tonalities of all characters into the circle of fifths, we would see the relation of parallel tritons. Therefore, one can see the revolution of the concept of the triton from its prohibition in early centuries until it becomes inevitable and forms basis for the composition systems of the 20th century. Triton in the 20th century becomes center of the discussions for its prohibition, for its position in theoretic systems. Persiheti and Kshenek describe triton as neutral and troublesome interval. Hindemith addresses it has to extreme dissonance. Kohn, the biggest dissonance, give to triton the biggest dissonance, while Jaworski calls it the most unstable interval. While researching triton, I came across, and in that we see some actually similarities between past and 20th century. It's interesting, I thought. And while researching triton, I came across the discussion, musicology discussion, among the music theorists arguing what is the bigger dissonance to human ear, triton or second. And the analysis example, we can listen a bit. It's just a short example. It's necessary to listen till the end. By Orstein, it calls Wild Man's Dance. And one musicologist, or 2 or 10 of them in discussion, said that there is a major and minor seconds, and that's why we have such a huge dissonance. And then I thought, okay, that's interesting. Why is that? And I just opened the score, because when you listen, it's really hard to tell. But I opened the score, and then I saw that in one vertical, for example, we have 5 tritons, or 4 tritons, or even 6 tritons. I don't know if it's possible to see right here, from F sharp to C, G sharp to D, B, E, and others. So I thought maybe it's triton, but it's really, you can only tell when you see the score. It's really hard to hear by your ear. Yeah, so, and I have one more example, which is almost hard and impossible to hear. And this is a scheme of the symphony by Webern, his area, when we have very symmetrical structures based on triton. And it's beautiful when you look at the pictures, but it's when you listen to the piece, it's impossible to understand that. So yeah, diatonically sound series are composed of the tritons, and we see that all the tritons marked red, a lot of them, in all vertical, horizontal, or diagonal structures. And I thought, paradoxically, that in tonal music, we always or usually pay attention to the triton, while in music based on triton, we do not distinguish them, and therefore it's also hard to analyze them by our ear. So, short conclusions. The 20th century brought new challenges and problems at the same time associated with a triton. It is assumed that the change of the concept of a triton, which is directly related to change of the conception of triton, determines the emergence of the new composing systems. This becomes obvious in the 20th century where the triton strongly determines the compositional process, as well as generates horizontal, vertical, and diagonal structures. In this paper, we regarded the concept of the triton from its prohibition to tritonic apotheosis as closely related to compositional process. And just the last sentence, ages ago, we have a lot of rules how to create music without the triton. And in the 20th century, we have a lot of rules how to create music with a triton. So yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you. That's really a fascinating intro. The birth and the death of the tonal system, I would say.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Welcome to questions.
Into the 20th, early part of the 20th century, I think it's important to note Bartok's use, compositional uses of the tritone, and in particular breaking up the octave into 3 equal sections of minor thirds, which gives you I'm thinking of his use of tonality in Bluebeard's Castle, and his use of the effect of using minor third, C, flat, F sharp, A, and their tonalities in bringing out the emotive qualities that underscore what's going on in the drama. For example, the sensual elements that are going on. So I'm not sure if you've had a look at Bartok's use of tritone in 20th century, but if you haven't, it's useful to to add to your data.
Oh yeah. Yeah, thank you for your comment. I did a few analyses on Bartok's music from the triton perspective. And on your particular example, it's hard to tell. I need to look at the score right now, and then it's easier. But I found actually relations between minor third and the triton in his macrocosmos, and he actually created the structures using minor third for example, C, A, or D, B, but also the tritone above, like C and F sharp, or A and D sharp. So I found several pieces where the system are based on, we can tell minor, minor thirds and the tritone. It's connected, very connected. Yeah.
That's and Y is axis system. That's actually explains these three axes. Okay. Go ahead.
No, I was just wondering a simple question about the modes by Messiaen, who all include the tritone and who obviously loved the tritone very much, which is kind of uncanny because he was a very Catholic person, and so I don't know. That would be nice to include, I thought.
Actually, it's during the time, 20 minutes, it's really hard to explain.
Yeah.
I live with tritone around 10 years, so it's hard to explain in 20 minutes. But yeah, Messiaen, he has some really interesting pieces based on tritone.
Remember, in the resonance of low C, a very sensitive ear could hear F sharp. That's quotation from Messiaen's Langage Musical.
In your research, kind of going back to the idea of why it's called the devil's instrument, is there any relationship that you're aware of with the actual harmonic series, the math behind what you're hearing?
In this paper, it was more like ideological, or like it's not very mathematical, because it's easy to tell that the proportion is 1000 something divided, but it's what it tells about the composition. So my accent in this paper was about the compositional process, so not about the mathematical or physical. Definitely we can find some theories and explain, but not in that paper, sorry.
Yeah, but it's very interesting thinking about harmonics series, that for example from C F sharp is not harmonic series. It's actually it should be quarter tone lower. Maybe it's the reason why we perceive that as very sharp, as very rough interval. That's it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Quick comment. I noticed on the grid of opinions regarding the tritone, under Schoenberg, it said consonants. I wouldn't be surprised that we would find several pages on the tritone in Hammerling Lyra, but that was Schoenberg's. I can look that up. I presume I can find several pages on the tritone in Schoenberg, and he argues that it's a consonant. It's a consonance. Is that correct?
He said that it's like far consonants. It's not like real consonants like fifth, but yeah, in his opinion, it's consonants, or very close to consonants.
Yeah, the fascinating bit in the harmonic series, like takes C and F sharp. F sharp is the 11th partial of C, but also the C is the 11th partial of F sharp. And it's the only pair of intervals that produce subsymmetry. So they somehow mirror each other, inextricably linked, for better or worse. Okay, any more questions?
Yes, I would comment that it's not actually the same, because if sharp should be quarter tone